This is Ahval Online, meeting point of accurate news and free comment on the current affairs of Turkey. Welcome to our podcast series.
Hello and welcome to Talking Turkey. I'm your host, Ahval editor David Lepeska, and with me today is Nervana Mahmoud, a medical doctor, Middle East analyst, and columnist for Arabic language news outlet Al-Hurra. Hello, Nervana, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, and thanks for inviting me.
You are welcome. We are speaking on Wednesday, August 12th, a day after Turkish President Erdogan threatened Greece and Egypt by telling them that the United States and the European Union are dealing with crises of their own and couldn't be relied upon to intervene in any possible conflict in the Eastern Mediterranean or Aegean. This followed several developments on Monday when Greece convened a National Security Council meeting and put its armed forces on high alert after a Turkish drilling ship flanked by naval vessels approached the Greek island of Kastellorizo, 2 kilometers from the Turkish coast. Egypt's involvement in all this is linked to Athens and Cairo last week signing a maritime borders agreement, which was likely in response to the maritime borders deal Turkey and Libya's Tripoli-based Government of National Accord, or GNA, signed last year, which essentially erased the island of Crete off the map. Egypt is also facing a potential military challenge from Turkey in Libya, where Turkey-backed GNA forces have pushed east towards Sirte and the Egyptian border in the past month or so, prompting Egyptian President Sisi to declare his military's readiness to intervene. We've got a lot of balls in the air here, Nervana, and we'll get to Libya in a minute, but responding to the latest developments yesterday on Twitter, you said the prospect of war is real in East Mediterranean. Then some hours later, you said there will neither be war nor successful mediations between Turkey and Greece. There will be endless skirmishes and plenty of howling, at least till November. And then you added that Erdogan's bark is worse than his bite. So I wonder, which is it? Is the prospect of war real right now, or do you think this is all more bark than bite?
Okay, I agree that the prospect of war is real, okay? Mm-hmm. But the percentage of it to happen, I don't see it as a high probability. Why? Because in my humble opinion, Erdogan, he is right when you mentioned that we shouldn't rely on America and we shouldn't rely on Europe. Neither of both of them have their own problems, and they might not intervene to stop the war. And even if they did try to intervene, they will only call to both parties to talk, and these talks will lead to nowhere. What I just do see is that the Erdogan, if he think that Greece on its own, he might act to create facts on the ground. However, I don't see him acting, or I don't see the chance of him to act and create new fact on the ground as some analysts fear, because he see Greece as not alone at the moment. Especially the Egyptian have the stake in the moment with Libya, with the maritime agreement with Greece, and with fighting the Ottoman everywhere in the Arab world at the moment. So he started to see that the Egyptians are not laughing. Of course, we know that Cyprus, the support of Cyprus is important as symbolic, but Cyprus doesn't have a navy in the substantial meaning to defend or engage into a war with. That's my knowledge, and I stand to be corrected here. But Egypt does. Egypt does have a navy who been upgraded recently and is willing to engage in a war if necessary. So basically, I'm not saying there is no formal military alliance between Greece and Egypt. But if Turkey start to do anything, Egypt start to see it as a threat of its national security, because Erdogan have already, as you rightly mentioned, signed a illegal maritime agreement with Libya. So in the moment, he can see Greece, Cyprus, Egypt as a unit, and there is a potential of dragging Israel into that, at least even in logistical support if necessary. That alone, even if it didn't materialize, is enough as a threat for Erdogan to think twice, in my humble opinion.
Turkey says that it remains ready to take part in negotiations. On Tuesday, Erdogan said, let's come together as Mediterranean countries. Let's find a formula that's acceptable for everyone. Greece has called for greater NATO and EU involvement in the Eastern Mediterranean. The EU has said Turkey's latest moves are, quote, extremely worrying. And today, Wednesday, EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell called an extraordinary Foreign Council meeting for Friday. It sounds like you think that the EU, NATO, and even the US are unlikely to do anything to intervene soon, or that if they did, they would be unable for some reason to organize impactful negotiations. Is that right? And why is that?
Yes. There is an interesting dynamic in Europe. First of all, there is the NATO pact who are desperate to maintain Turkish membership at every cost. And we saw the head of the NATO making comments about we should have as a spirit of partners and members of the NATO,
Apologies. I should just mention that Greece and Cyprus are EU members and Greece and Turkey are both NATO members. Sorry.
Correct. And so the dynamic is that NATO trying not to upset Turkey at every cost. EU is divided between the strongholds like against Turkey, like the French, but also they have the appeaser or the one who are taking, let's say, a softer stance against Turkey, like Italy and probably Germany, if I may say. At least they just want to. They are not willing to indulge into treating the root of the problem, which is Erdogan ambition and blue nationhood, as he
blue homeland, yes.
Yes, but also they are not willing to aggravate it. I mean, let's face it. I heard a guy, without mentioning him, saying, "Oh, Greece got a lot of islands, so if they give one or two to Turkey, it's not a smaller one, then maybe that will solve the problem." But it won't solve the problem. That's what they fail to see, because Erdogan, as you mentioned earlier, he would like to, if Cyprus and Crete out of the map, his life will be a lot better. But unfortunately, neither Cyprus nor Crete will disappear from the map, and neither of them are willing to return to the Ottoman influence. So the Europeans are not willing to dig deep and put Erdogan or show red cards for Erdogan, if I may say. So they will just hoping just to for a quieter summer until an autumn, until the American election happen, and maybe with a new administration they work on a better formula to calm the tension. But in my humble opinion, that will not work either. We're having a very interesting situation in America. While Trump is, you can say he's cozy with Erdogan, but on the same time, he is unwilling for a war to erupt in the East Med while he looked weak before the election. So I think the whole dynamic is a zero sum, and it will not lead to any winners or loser at the moment. And I think the more the Greece, Egypt, Cyprus alliance play for time and campaign in European capital and American capital for a small goals, like let's just freeze everything for now, let's just not exaggerate, let's just press on Turkey not to create new facts on the ground, and it's pointless to negotiate while the American heading for election. So let's just calm down the situation, freeze the situation for now. If they reach that target alone, they will be, in my humble opinion, a winner, because whatever happened in the new administration in 2021 will be different. Will the Turks agree to wait? that will depend on all sorts of factors. But at least if they got a message clear from everyone that don't exaggerate now, don't exacerbate the situation, don't be aggressive, maybe that will be enough for the other side.
So Turkey seeks to kind of gain more ground to push the envelope further, but the European side, at least Greece and Cyprus, should at least for now kind of focus on freezing things as they are, at least for the next few months.
I don't think it is wise to look for solution, because the European will not impose a solution on Turkey, and neither the American. So if we play for time, I think that's a better goal to play with. Because if you ask Germany to put a brake on the Turkish ambition for now, maybe that is a goal the German can work for. But if you ask them to stand for Erdogan, you're probably asking too much.
Let's turn to Egypt. Tensions between Ankara and Cairo trace back to Sisi's mid-2013 ouster of Mohamed Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood, an Islamist group that has links to Turkey's ruling Justice and Development Party, or AKP. Turkey quite reasonably saw the removal of Morsi as a coup, essentially cut ties with the Sisi regime, and continued to support Brotherhood-linked groups around the region, and welcomed exiled brothers to Turkey, where they launched a number of pro-Brotherhood news outlets like Rabat TV. A few months ago, an op-ed in state-owned Al Haram called for détente between Turkey and Egypt. But now the two, as I mentioned earlier, are facing off in both Libya and over energy in the Eastern Mediterranean. In a Deutsche Welle article yesterday, a German analyst, Stefan Rohl, said, quote, Egypt's leadership feels markedly threatened by Turkey, which it has accused of planning a counter coup. I wonder what you think of this. Does Egypt feel threatened by Turkey? And if so, is the threat more about energy resources, about Libya, or about political Islam?
Threaten, I think, is too big of a word. I think the Sisi regime, if we're talking about the domestic front inside Egypt, I think one of the biggest miscalculation of Erdogan is that he assumed the popularity of the Muslim Brotherhood inside Egypt is higher than what it is on the ground. So even we're talking about what happened in 2013, right, wrong, bad, evil. I think we've gone beyond that point now. We have a regime which, unlike the Islamists who are based in Istanbul, they see it as a weak, vulnerable regime. I don't see anything in reality to support that. I think the regime is well-rooted, well-established, and is not in any threat. Nobody will never know. Things can change in 24 hours. But all I'm saying, the regime is not Sisi. The regime is well-established within the pillar of the state. So if anything happen to any name, they will replace names. But the regime will not change anytime soon, especially that all the opposition groups, including the one in Turkey, have very, very little popularity. For 100 million people living in Egypt, they are more popular outside Egypt than in Egypt, if I may say.
The Muslim Brotherhood as well.
Yes. It's a very big mess. Just if we go back in 2012 election, the Muslim Brotherhood won quarter of the vote, and this is in the peak of the revolution in the first part. So Morsi in the first round of the election got 25% of the vote. They went on to the second round, and people were divided into just let's backing Morsi or backing his opponent who was a Mubarak man. So some have just grudgingly voted for Morsi just out of not electing another Mubarak man. So the 25% of the first round of the presidential election in 2012, which was the most free and fair election, is probably roughly reflects the popularity of the Muslim Brotherhood in 2012. Now, 8 years later, I will see people who are not particularly a fan of the group, except the hardcore member and sympathizers of the group. Other than that, are just bots in the social media. They are more popular in Pakistan than inside Egypt, to be frankly honest. They are people who don't like the regime, but if you ask them, are you willing to throw the regime and create uncertainty, they will be very reluctant to embrace the uncertainty again. judging with the result of the Arab Spring and with the current upheaval in the region as a whole. So let's just move from the threat internally. But if we're talking about the threat to the Sisi government or the Egyptian government see as regional threat, yes, they see Turkey as a threat everywhere. Even in Lebanon now, the Turkey immediately jumped in and offered to build the port in Beirut. So the Egyptian jumped in with the Emiratis and offered a counter offer to build the port and invest in Lebanon, because they just see that everywhere where there is a weak state in the Arab region, the Turks jump in and bring the Ottoman card and try to flirt with the citizen of this country. They already had that in Syria, they already had that in Libya, and they are not willing to face that in other Arab countries. So the whole East Med now, there is a game of power and influence between the Emirati and Egyptian on one side, and the Saudi, I can say, and the Turkish-Qatari alliance on the other side. And I still see that even in each country of those, the Turks appeal for a small group of people who have either Islamist sympathizers or dreamer of a better life. They still believe Turkey have a strong economy, stuff like that, and they believe that Turkey can have the answers to their ills. Like you go in Tripoli.
I mean, but Erdogan still, let me just ask, I mean, Erdogan still does come out well in those like Arab region, Muslim world polls on the most popular leader.
Mm-hmm, correct. But yes, but not as much. Like every year, it take a little bit from him. So if you compare 2020 with 2011, his popularity in the Arab world is less. It's still high, but getting less, eroded every year. Why? Because they start to see his irrationality. They start to see that he didn't solve Syria, for example. So in 2012, there was a lot of people thinking Erdogan will fix Syria. When he backed down to the Russian, when he allowed the Assad regime to survive, people start to question things. Now Libya is divided, and he didn't up till now challenge the Sisi red line insert. So people start to question that again. Is he that strong, or he just talking? So every year his popularity is getting a notch less.
You mentioned rebuilding Lebanon after the Beirut blasts. I wonder if you see a future Lebanese government. I mean, there's not one right now. The whole cabinet just resigned. But if you see it leaning one way or the other towards Egypt and the UAE, or towards Turkey in terms of working with a partner to rebuild.
Well, I think there is a Pandora box opened in Lebanon by the Beirut explosion, and it's very, very hard to see what will come out of it, because we don't know what compromises Hezbollah is willing to give to the French and to the American in return of allowing a government to be formed in Lebanon. And I believe the Lebanese are, again, like many people in the region, are playing for time. So the caretaker, the Lebanese government resigned, but there will be the same government will be a caretaking government until a new government is formed. I'm not. If I'm a gambler, I will gamble that the Lebanese government will not be formed anytime soon. But you never know how the cards will be played. But everybody in the region are waiting for the American election. Surprise, surprise. So people will just play for time. The Iranian hoping that the new Biden, if Biden won, they will ease the pressure on them. Hezbollah is become very tamed, and Hassan Nasrallah delivered a speech, even praised Macron for his support and help for Lebanon. I didn't even expect that. I thought he will deny any link with the explosion, but I was really surprised that he is softer with Macron, which means
not the sort of thing he usually does.
Yes. So tamed Hezbollah, tamed Iran. Everybody is waiting to see how the DC crowd will change after the election. Who will come and how who will run things. So based on that, a lot of people would like to freeze things rather than making drastic changes. Whether the people on the street of Lebanon will put up with things until November, that probably will be another factor to see. So basically, go back to your question. I think the Lebanese, apart from certain groups of the Sunnat in the north who are really strong fan of Erdogan, and you will find the Turkish flags in Sunnis area in Tripoli, north of Lebanon, who are really fan of the group. Apart from this particular group, the rest of Lebanon are wary. They have more link with Iran than with Turkey, and they are not willing to play with fire. So I think the Arabs are trusted partners. They tried them before. They worked with them before. And
The
they,
Saudis particularly, sorry.
yes, and the Emiratis as well. And they didn't have, their interest is mainly business, which is a language the Lebanese understand more than anything else, rather than a business which is come with Islamism. Let's remember, all the damage area is the business areas of Lebanon, is the heart of the tourism, is the heart of the companies, all this kind of stuff. They are not willing to embrace Islamism. They just want a free, fair, business-friendly, economic Lebanon. So if there is an alternative of $1 million per million, they will take the million from the Arab, I think. But as I say, we'll never know how this will be played. But I don't see Erdogan as winning much inside Lebanon. But the Saudi and the Emirati and the Egyptian have to do their homework as well and empower moderate Sunnis like Hariri, rather than allowing the radical groups to win among the Sunni population.
Before we dig a bit deeper into political Islam, just one quick question about Libya. You shared a tweet from Al Hadath News today highlighting cracks starting to appear within Turkey-backed GNA militias as one faction is pushing to launch an assault on the all-important city of Sirte. You added the hashtags Egypt, Sisi, and Red Line. So, more particularly, what did this mean to you? Do you expect the GNA to launch this long reported assault on Sirte, or are you seeing real cracks starting to appear?
The cracks are there. Those militia are never a united militia. The same cracks we saw it in Syria in Idlib region. So these cracks are no surprise and is part of the normal evolution of these groups. What unites them is fight. When there is no fight, they will start to bicker among each other. But I think who put the brake for the march towards Sirte is the Turk. It's not the GNA. The GNA lost all decision-making abilities since Erdogan and his advisor took over control in Western Libya. And that's, funny enough, is linked with the escalation in the East Med, because obviously if Erdogan decided to escalate with Greece or above the borders, an island, then he will not escalate in Libya. And if he gets frustrated on that front, he might try to trigger an escalation in Libya. He is not ready for a Libyan escalation to breach the red line. That's the bottom line, because he still needs to transfer obscene amount of equipment and artillery and high-tech stuff before he can face a traditional war against the Egyptian. So he knows that he still needs few months in preparation of this war, because initially he thought Sisi is bluffing, but now he got a message from many people that he is not. So let's go back. There was one tweet I was intrigued with from Nicholas Danforth. He said, in asserting his Turkish maritime rights, Turkey putting forward some kind of logic legal claim, or is the premises of logic and legality have anything to do with the other side claim either? So basically, he's asking, is Turkey playing with the logic of, we being unfairly treated after First World War, or no, they're saying everything is illogical and this is our logic and we will force it. And I found that tweet sum up the problem with Turkey. They flicker between the logic of war games and the illogic of ideology. And this flickering from one side to the other makes them irrational and not coherent in their policies. And that's why it is difficult to predict, but it usually fires back at them, if that makes sense.
Speaking of ideology, last year, after Trump raised the issue of the United States possibly labeling the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist group, you wrote for Carnegie's Middle East Center that the Muslim Brotherhood is a cult, that it abuses Islam, and that by designating the Brotherhood a terrorist group, the U.S. would send a clear message to the likes of Turkey, which supports Muslim Brotherhood-linked Hamas, which the U.S. and EU have designated a terrorist group. Do you still think today that the U.S. should label the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist group?
I think if if we stem, yes, that's the shorter answer. If we stem all the problem in the region is a problem based on rejection of modernity, and this rejection of modernity coming in many sources, especially the ideology of political Islam, who believe we should go back in time and reignite the caliphate and all this kind of stuff. It's the Sunni version of the Iranian mullah regime, and Iran, after 40 years, we see how Iran now is struggling and not doing any well. And its version of the caliphate, Shia version of caliphate, didn't particularly bring prosperity to its people. And now we see the Sunni side is a failed side politically, but also because it still embraces the language of swords, the language of aggression, the language of terrorism. It refused to stop the backing of terror groups. So the definition of terrorism in Erdogan's mind is that my terror groups are halal, other terror groups are haram. And this is the illogic I was talking about. Instead of putting a blanket aggression, say the PKK is a terrorist, the Hamas is a terrorist, he refused to even draw any comparison or see any similarity between the two groups. And that's why banning the Muslim Brotherhood will send a message to Turkey. You are a NATO ally who deal with terrorists. You have to make a choice. Do you choose NATO or choose your terrorist friends?
But there are also possible pitfalls with demonizing political Islam. Alongside your Carnegie piece, Alison Pargeter of King's College in London argued that designating the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization would open the door to further tyranny in a region already replete with repression. She pointed out that authoritarian regimes have long used the threat of Islamism to justify suppressing political opponents. And this, of course, would include Sisi and his predecessor, Hosni Mubarak. She also said that the Muslim Brotherhood, despite facing all these great challenges, has largely refrained from violence in recent years. What do you think of all that?
Well, first of all, the first argument that it will help flourishing other groups, it's already happening without banning the Muslim Brotherhood. We have radical Salafi groups who are flourishing everywhere, and they just only responded to, like ISIS, only when the American fought them with other forces, they crushed, but not ideologically, they're still around. So the other radical Salafi groups still, they might be under the ground, but they didn't vanish. The second group, I didn't ask for banning of a Nahda group because although I disagree with their ideology, but at least they choose to practice politics and they are not sponsoring a militia. If the Muslim Brotherhood are willing to engage only in politics and stand and say, we against Hamas terrorist attack, we against Islamic Jihad is a terrorist attack, we will not sponsor those groups and provide clear financial accounts which dissociating them from charities group supporting terror groups, then yes, but by all means don't ban them and just reject and fight the ideology. But they part of the Muslim Brotherhood problem is they choose grayish, 50 shades of gray. So they maintain indirect links to charities which sponsor terrorists, but then they say we are a political group. They cannot have their cake and eat it.
Last week, you wrote in a piece published by Ahval, or republished by Ahval, ever since the birth of the mother group of political Islam, the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, the Quran and the sword have been used as logos symbolizing the dream of retrieving the caliphate. You pointed to the reconversion of Hagia Sophia into a mosque, with Erdogan reciting the Quran and the Imam holding the sword of conquest at the first Friday prayers there as symbolizing the return of this Islamist vision. In your piece, you essentially argued, as I understood it, that despite the claims of Islamist leaders today, we have no evidence that a caliph would rule any more justly than, for instance, your average Arab authoritarian, or more to the point, Erdogan himself. Do you think, writing this piece, do you think there's a real possibility of Turkey moving to create a new caliphate?
The problem is that with someone with Erdogan, you have to expect every possibilities. let me just, if you allow me a minute, just to explain that I heard this kind of dream about converting Hagia Sophia to a mosque since I was in Egypt in medical school in Cairo. The Muslim Brotherhood or Islamists won the student union in my university, and they talked about the exact same words I'm hearing from the Turks at the moment. So they just keep recycling the same stuff again. And funny enough, all the debates I had with them about how you're going to make the caliphate fair and just for everyone, and again, you will find answers which is aggressive and rejectionist. They are very good in telling you what they don't like, but they will never tell you how to materialize what they believe into clear system of governance. Whether Erdogan, back to your simple question, whether Erdogan can make it, yes, he can, but if he run out of all other options, so he will just claim that he is the softer caliphate and he's sponsoring all these groups in the Middle East and he will protect them. It will not cost him much. It's a symbolic. So I think he will go for, I mentioned 3 options, and I think the third option is a possibility that he will claim himself as a softer or inspiratory figure for all Islamists around the group. Nothing will stop him from calling that because it will not cost much as a fact on the ground.
Right. It's interesting that you say that. I mean, the fact that you were hearing similar things in medical school back in Egypt years ago suggests that there is considerable support for not only reconverting Hagia Sophia, but this possible caliphate. So it suggests, like, as a symbol, it may be powerful and effective and impactful for Turkey.
For hardcore Islamists around the globe, yes. Every Islamist around the group dream about that. They say we had enough from modernism and let's just go back to the united Ummah. It will never change. All I'm arguing is that this group is shrink every year. Is not getting bigger. So let's assume Erdogan have 100 fans in 2012. Now they are only probably 15 or 20. I'm talking like just metaphorically here. So within that 20 are the hardcore. So what Erdogan have at the moment are the hardcore one who will never abandon the dream of the caliphate because this is what they set their mind into. They are looking at the past for solution and will never change. The people who were 50-50 looking for answers, they start to see more that the caliphate, it doesn't exist. But within that hard group, like in Egypt, there are groups who fantasize about the Ottoman time. One of the anchors of Al Jazeera after the Beirut explosion wrote that the part of the port which is still standing was built by the Ottoman. It was wrong lie, historical lie, but it was gone as wildfire, and people change it and retweet it as a fact. Why?
This is the sort of thing that Trump does all the time. But yes, thank you.
Yes, exactly. But it is a kind of spreading incorrect news, and people want to believe it. So they wanted to believe that if the Ottoman come back, they will just save the Arab world from its misery. And what I mentioned in my piece is correct. None of those people who believe Erdogan as a caliph will solve his problem or her problem will never ask himself what will happen if he is a poor man in the caliphate. They always dream that they will be the rich, the leader, the one who own harem, the one who can marry 4 wives and have 70 slaves. But they never ask themselves, how's life under the caliphate if he's a poor man? And they don't like to answer that question.
Mm-hmm. Last question for you. Turkish Defense Minister Hulusi Akar was set to visit Baghdad this week, tomorrow, in fact, but Iraqi officials yesterday canceled his visit after a Turkish drone strike killed 2 senior Iraqi military commanders in northern Iraq. Turkish forces launched an incursion into Iraq's Kurdish region in late June, looking to push Kurdish militants back from the border, as Ankara has done in northeast Syria starting late last year. Mm-hmm. Responding to Baghdad's cancellation of Akar's visit, you said on Twitter, quote, "Time for Iraq to stand up to Turkish bullying." To me, this seemed like a reference to kind of Turkish aggressions in the Eastern Mediterranean, and it suggests that now maybe Iraq is joining or might soon join this growing regional anti-Turkey alliance of Greece, Cyprus, France, the UAE, Israel, and Egypt. What do you think of that idea?
Iraq is in a very tough position because it is a weak state. It's a weak state. They allowed or turn a blind eye to Turkish infiltration to their northern border under the pretext of fighting Kurdish guerrilla. But once the Turks stepped the line, which was bound to happen anyway, that they will end up killing an Iraqi security forces, and that is too much for Baghdad to ignore. But joining any grand alliance in the region from Iraq will be symbolic. We have to remember also the water war. The water of the Euphrates is getting less and less in Iraq because of Turkish building dam on Euphrates. So there is a water tension between the two countries, and now there is casualties and formal aggression. So the problem was the Turks see Iraq as a second-class nation. Like, okay, they will venture for a bit, but then they will shut up. But now it's too much for Iraq to keep quiet. I just want to add, funny enough, how many in the Arab world are puzzled by the defense minister, Hulusi Akar. I hope I pronounce his name right. There is an Egyptian who actually wrote an article saying why he is putting up for Erdogan, failing to see that it's Erdogan who chooses him out of the other political military elite after the coup. So basically, they don't see the dynamic in Turkey, and they compare it with their own. In every Arab country, the defense minister is a powerful guy, and the Turkish military was powerful before Erdogan. Now the Turkish military is just bowing and buying the ideology of Erdogan. So Hulusi Akar is for us Arab, watching him talking about Erdogan ideology and threatening other countries and all this kind of stuff is surreal, to be frankly honest. But the Iraqi have cancelled his visit in the last minute, isn't it?
Can I just ask, just to be clear, to clarify, you're suggesting like Hulusi Akar is a symbol of the military just accepting everything Erdogan says and following his dictates?
Yes, a tamed military, a bowing to military, a military of a sultan, not a military of a republic. So that's how many Arabs start to see that the military is just like we used to have. What the Turks failed to see is that we used to have our stories of the Turkish Ottoman rule. My grandmother used to tell me stories, used to tell me good jokes about how the Arabs used to hate the Turks as Ottoman. So my grandmother used to tell me that we used to draw semi-caricatures them as kids of the Ottoman, like the head of the military as a bowing figure to the Sultan. And she used to tell me how we used to laugh about those figures and how it is silly. And, they don't want coups, they don't want the army to be too powerful, but they don't want a president to control the army. They want the president to listen to the army to make the right military decision. And now it is what we see is that Turkey is the military not doing the right military decision because the army is scared of saying the truth to Erdogan. While I will say the difference that Egypt, for example, people say Sisi is a dictator. Yes, but that's not the point I'm trying to make. What I'm trying to say that if Sisi sat with his military advisors, he will listen to them. They will tell him this is our abilities and this is our things which is beyond us. And he will listen. He will never make a decision based on aspiration. He will make decision based on facts. I am not so sure in Turkey the equation is the same.
About what your grandmother said, it's interesting. It suggests this idea that there was some resentment among the Arabs of their Ottoman rulers, which is not surprising, but it suggests that today, as Turkey sort of colonizes more and more Arab lands in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya, in Somalia as well, it suggests there's going to be growing resentment. Have we seen that? Are you seeing that?
Yes, you will know from the writing of anybody, any average Egyptian on Facebook, is a guy Islamist or non-Islamist from the way they praise Erdogan or turn against Erdogan. A lot of people talk and mock, but not in a subtle Arabic way, so not Facebook can ban it, put it that way. But they just see him as a laughable figure, very angry, very theatrical. While the Islamists who believe in him see him as a very kind, pious guy. And you will find the argument between the two sides sometimes fascinating and drastically depressing, because I remember one debate between two guys, and the Islamists say Erdogan is a very kind guy. So the other reply to him and say, yes, but he's not my father-in-law. What is his kindness will do to me if he's ruining my country? So this is the kind of things. Who care about the kindness? We're talking about a vision. Even the hardcore Sisi supporter will not say Sisi is kind. This is not a word that describes Sisi. They will say he is cunning. And people love him for that kind of stuff. It's love because this is the kind of leadership skills they want. They want someone who knows his ability and know his own limitation. And a lot in the Arab world don't see Erdogan as a man. His ambition is more than his own ability.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like the dividing line is mainly this political Islam issue and where you fall.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Nervana Mahmoud, a medical doctor, an independent Middle East analyst and columnist for Al-Hurra. Thank you so much. It's really been a delight. Thanks for your time and your insights.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
You can follow Ahval News Online podcast series through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, and Spreaker. All you need to know about Turkey is here, for your ears, mind, and attention. Thank you for listening to our podcast.